Welcome to our webinar on maximizing revenue through ABM advertising, a CMO guide. My name is Mani Iyer, and I am the CEO of Quanzu. Here at Quanzu, we specialize in ABM advertising, website analytics, sales insights. We work with many mid to large B2B enterprises. In terms of my background, prior to Quanzu, I founded and sold a company to Oracle. I've been a marketing and technology executive at several companies, including Oracle, Ingress, and Microsoft. It is my pleasure to invite my co-presenter on this webinar, Rahul Sachdev, CEO of Fortella. Rahul, could you please introduce yourself and tell the folks a little bit about Fortella?
Thank you, Mani. Hello, everyone. This is Rahul Sachdev. I'm a co-founder and CEO of Fortella, a revenue-driven marketing platform. We connect top-down corporate planning and bottoms-up marketing execution with centered around revenue. Think of Fortella as a product that provides CMOs with a forward-looking marketing plan based on your actual funnel performance and tells you what you need to do to help you meet your pipeline goals. My background has been over 20 years of experience in the CRM, marketing, and social media space, both as a marketer and also working at MarTech companies in a variety of roles. During the span of my career, I've seen B2B marketing expand from direct mail to digital, starting with web, email, mobile, social media, and now conversational marketing. But some of the challenges around marketing haven't changed that much. But one thing I have seen change over time is that I've seen the role of CMO expand from being stewards of companies' brand to being engines of growth. And that was really the genesis of Fortella. Our mission is to help CMOs and marketing practitioners connect their tactical execution, marketing execution to their revenue plans, and we provide a software solution to help CMOs do that. Hope that helps.
Absolutely, Rahul, and I'm certainly excited about talking to you all about revenue-driven marketing and then connecting it to different areas that we specialize here at Quanzu. So let me kind of ask you first, what do you think is top of mind for CMOs today?
Well, to me, it all comes down to revenue. As one of my former CEOs would say, revenue cures all ills. There's much has been written about increasing pressures on CMOs and how the CMO tenure is getting shorter. It's something like 3.5 years across the industry. Probably in our tech industry, it's closer to 2 years. It's a big job and it's getting tougher because the number of demands being placed on the marketing organizations, the number of channels, the amount of data they have to deal with, are getting bigger and bigger. And above all, there's pressure to demonstrate ROI. And the CMOs that I speak to, they feel under pressure, almost under siege, to justify their existence and their budgets. Now, most CMOs understand, Mani, that their ultimate goal is not leads or clicks or campaigns, but revenue. But there is a need to think differently, the need to plan marketing activities around revenue, rather than sort of these campaigns or leads or targets, and that's not easy. So at Fortella, we believe there is a new approach needed in the industry. CMOs really need to be doing revenue-driven marketing, and that's what Fortella is all about.
Yeah, so Rahul, I'm sure you will agree, right, that CMOs don't have a shortage of, vendors and technologies and folks, pitching them all day long. So can you, specifically talk about revenue-driven marketing and let's get into that if you would.
Yeah, sure, Mani. So as I mentioned earlier, we know that marketing has gone digital and the number of channels has proliferated. However, marketers are still stuck in this mindset of measuring their effectiveness primarily through the tactical performance of 10 or 20 systems that you mentioned. And it comes down to vanity metrics like campaign performance or number of leads or MQLs or engagement. And they mostly do it by calculating the historic or backward-looking impact of these tactics on companies' revenue. Revenue-driven marketing as a framework turns that on its head. Think of it as a strategy and technology for aligning marketing execution with your revenue plan in a forward-looking way. So this involves CMOs looking at the company's growth strategy and committing marketing to impacting revenue-related KPIs for the company's go-to-market segments. So it's really ultimately about having a revenue mindset, about having a number, and about operationalizing that revenue-driven mindsets and goals into a set of tactics.
Yeah, that's great, Rahul. So should we drill down a bit? Maybe you can get to some specific examples.
Yeah, I would actually share with the audience a 4-step guide that Fortell has created around how to do revenue-driven marketing.
Okay.
And I would begin with number 1. The first recommendation we would say to our CMOs is align marketing to your corporate growth strategy. We ask you to begin with, what is your company's growth strategy? Most companies measure revenue for multiple go-to-market segments. These could be enterprise account tiers like enterprise, mid-market, SMB, or geographies, or product lines, or industries. So whatever your ways of, your go-to-market structure is, let's start with that. Understand what your company's plans to grow are, and how marketing can contribute to that. And we recommend that this is something you do at least once a year and review quarterly. So now that you have that in place, the second thing we recommend is CMOs decide what they will measure to impact those corporate growth goals. And that should also be an annual process, which should be reviewed on a quarterly basis. So now you know what your company's growth strategy is and how marketing is going to impact it. Now is a good time to start thinking about what you're going to do about it, what your plan, marketing mix should be. So you should assess that at least once a quarter, ideally more often in faster moving companies. But ultimately, we all know it's about execution. So in order to be revenue focused, you need the ability to know your impact, marketing's impact on corporate revenue goals for your various go-to-market segments, whether it's the enterprise segment or North America or a particular product line. Ideally, on a weekly, if not more frequent basis. This can allow you to adjust your tactics much faster, be agile. We'll also recommend that CMOs communicate their organization's performance back to their stakeholders, the CEO, the CFO, the CRO, through the lens of their corporate revenue goals versus tactical performance. And that's what we bake these insights and recommendations into Fortella's application. So CMOs don't have to look through spreadsheets and Tableau dashboards for calculating historic marketing impact, but really have a forward-looking view of their revenue plans.
That sounds great, Rahul. So, and I think to make it more tangible, I think this is where I believe you wanted to get into, a specific scenario.
Yeah. So, let me share a growth strategy of a fictitious company. This could be, I'm sure a lot of our audience can relate to this. This is a planning season, so a lot of people are kind of thinking about this. So let's just imagine a company that has got a number of growth strategy goals. They want to upsell a new product into their install base, particularly the global or strategic customers. And they want to drive some additional, booking, say $250 million in booking, and increase their penetration. Now, the second goal could be they want to expand into building solutions for specific industries. Maybe they want to measure that by signing up, top 5 of the 5 of the top 10 companies in healthcare and financial services, and deliver $50 million of bookings through that. Let's imagine that there is a third goal, which is to expand their footprint into Asia Pacific region, right? And get a share of revenue of about 5% in Asia, 25 million. And maybe there's a goal around partner ecosystem to really strengthen that by investing in strategic system integrators and ISV partners to reach new markets. Now, marketing, this is a classic growth strategy that many companies could come up with. And the question now is, how does marketing impact those goals?
Yep.
So that's where we would recommend to our audience, number one, you begin with. You align your marketing strategy to your corporate growth strategy.
And I believe we were going to look at some of those KPIs next, correct?
Right. So now, exactly. So I think now that you've done that, now you're going to say, okay, what is it that marketing needs to do to measure its effectiveness against those corporate KPIs? Marketing can't be responsible for all of that, but it is responsible for specific goals. So our recommendation is for marketing to commit to those goals. So let's just say, taking the same example, that you want to generate new bookings for this new product across your strategic and global accounts, and maybe 50% of the pipeline for that needs to be sourced from marketing. So that shifts the conversation from measuring leads to being accountable for qualified pipeline as your marketing KPI. Yep. So at Fortella, we're really big proponents that marketing should be thinking along those lines. And many times I hear from CMOs, well, how can I be responsible for pipeline or bookings when I don't own the sales process? So we're a big proponents at Fortella, as an opinion, that SDRs and BDRs should be tightly aligned with marketing, ideally maybe falling under that organization, because it's harder for CMOs, we agree, to be accountable for qualified pipeline if you don't have the means to qualify it. And our recommendation is that CMOs go even further and commit to bookings targets. Just like sales, marketing should have a quota. Now, I often hear CMOs saying, well, I don't control what happens to an opportunity once it goes into sales land. And my response is, sure, I agree. But if you're actively tracking marketing source bookings, then you'll pay a lot more attention to the quality of your pipeline and the specific tactics you need to drive to deliver that. So this is really about having revenue as a shared objective for marketing.
Yeah, absolutely. And
so, so I think the next question you might be asking is, okay, well then how do I translate that into a set of tactics, right?
Yeah.
So I think this is where the key difference is that we're looking at tactics from the lens of, first and foremost, corporate growth strategy and measurable KPIs as they impact the future revenue. So this forces the discussion on close examination of what accounts do I need to deliver, what accounts will deliver these this revenue. So is it in the example that we cited, it's the global and strategic accounts, or healthcare industry, or Asia Pacific region. These are the account segments that you need to be thinking about. It also nudges marketing then to think about their target buyers. Who are the people at these strategic accounts, or in healthcare industry, or in Asia Pacific region that we need to target? And that will then dovetail into the discussion around messaging or personalization. Next thing, you need to think about channel mix. Some tactics work better in some segments than others. Some tactics work better with some personas than others. So the next thing we do is we encourage CMOs to think carefully about orchestration. Think about the sequence of those tactics. Look at the ideal customer journeys that have worked for those segments, any evidence you have around that have worked for those segments in the past, and decide what combination of tactics result in the best revenue outcomes. And finally, I'd say look at the relative cost data to understand the anticipated or expected ROI. Every company has a budget constraint, and it's important to know what you will do versus what you won't. So that's some of the key questions that we ask our CMO friends to ask. So Mani, moving on to the next slide, I've been doing a lot of talking, so let me ask you a question. You're an expert in paid ABM advertising, and since we are talking about paid ABM advertising, let's say that this fictitious company that we just talked about, its CMO wants to commit to a certain amount of a pipeline goal from marketing. and wants to maybe acquire a certain number of logos, new logos. Can you help our audience understand, particularly the CMOs, how ABM can deliver that? And I think it may be good to first begin with understanding what ABM can do and what it can't do.
Yeah, no, appreciate that, Rahul. I think we really should start there, keep it at a top level first for CMOs. And so that's why we, as you know, put this visual together, which really first lays out a framework to think about the market segments, as you called it, that the CMO may be focusing on, that where they're trying to penetrate and generate revenue for the business. And so we've got the markets segment side of it broken up into whether it's a new market and you're trying to go after net new logos, or an existing market, you have existing customer base and you're trying to do an upsell or a cross-sell. And then another dimension here is really the cost and complexity of the solutions that your company may be bringing to market. And so there, we've certainly have found that ABM broadly, and then certainly more specifically ABM advertising, works very well when you are going after accounts which are in the mid to large enterprise segment. And we'll certainly talk about ABM advertising and what that capability wise, what that delivers, what that brings to the CMO and the B2B marketing organization. But certainly mid to large enterprise accounts that are being pursued with a certain ACV threshold, like you see here, 20,000 or more in ACV. And then also there's some complexity in terms of the buying group or buying team at these target accounts. So 3 or more buyers are being involved. And that's where it makes a lot of sense. Back to our specific example of a new product being sold to an existing customer base. So it's a more of an upsell use case, as you can see. Aligns pretty well to a check yes to ABM on the kind of the bottom right box that you see here, Rahul. So that's certainly one thing to keep in mind. And you'll also see that ABM advertising especially can play all the way through the sales cycle, all the way from an opportunity being an early stage to a mid stage to a late stage. So Rahul, that hopefully gives our listeners and our CMOs a good idea of where they could apply ABM advertising.
Yeah, that's great, Mani. So let me be a devil's advocate for a minute. Can I? So I've been hearing about ABM advertising for several years now, right? I'm a CMO, but I also hear about content marketing and events and organic and social media and chat, conversational marketing. There's a lot of stuff coming at us. So let me ask you 2 questions. Is this something that my demand gen team needs to worry about? Why do I care about it? And should I even worry about this as part of my 2020 planning? I'll get to it when I can.
No, that's a very good question, Rahul. And let me kind of, at least our take on why CMOs should care, right? So there's really 2 key drivers, the way we see it, for CMOs to think about where they really should be investing in ABM advertising in 2020. One is, the good news is ABM advertising is now proven. I mean, there have been a lot of new approaches, third-party data sources that all became available for driving ABM advertising, meaning being able to deliver very targeted ads into accounts and buyers and buyer personas at those accounts. All the data for targeting or data for engagement, etc., has all popped up in the last couple of years. And the good news is several independent analysts have been able to confirm with a large set of customers that it works. So as you can see, these numbers are for ABM, but if you look at any one of the ABM programs that have been deployed across many, many companies, ABM advertising is a key part of that. A lot of the investment is going into ABM advertising. That's one driver, the fact that it is a proven strategy, proven approach that works. So it's a good investment for CMOs to make. The other one is actually more urgent. The fact is, what you would consider traditional demand generation tactics, be it email-based nurture tactics, coming from marketing automation tools and platforms, or phone-based outreach, by sales teams. It's harder than ever to get the attention of your, senior executive buyers at these target companies. And they are not even going to be allowed without opt-in with the arrival of certain new data privacy rules. I'm sure, Rahul, you're familiar with the California Consumer Privacy Act that's going into effect in January of 2020. And the enforcement is going to start in July. And so now you've got GDPR that's been in effect for a couple of years, and or more, in fact. And then you've got CCPA coming into effect. So CMOs are suddenly faced with the fact that to achieve the reach and engagement that they need at their target buyers and target accounts, there aren't too many other options, if you think about it, to reach those senior and executive buyers. So this is very timely, we believe, for CMOs to consider as a place to invest. And the other point I want to make is ABM advertising. When you especially work with providers who are well versed in this area, who are working with data partners, who are again able to deliver their global data at global scale, they've all made sure that the data that they work with and the programs that they deliver is CCPA and GDPR compliant. Rahul?
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. And these are pretty compelling ROI numbers, Mani. And I think your point about the new privacy rules that are just coming into effect in California and what we've seen in the result of GDPR is certainly gives us pause for thought. So, okay, now you've convinced me that I, as a CMO, should be thinking about ABM, paid ABM advertising seriously. But let's go further and think about the number of ABM vendors that are out there. Can you help the audience understand how to sort of navigate that landscape? And specifically, we have customers that have pretty lean organizations and marketing organizations and need some help from an external provider. There are other customers that we have at Fortella that have got agencies that they work through, right? And they have a different way of executing their marketing tactics. And there's yet another category of companies that have got fully staffed, very expert marketing organizations. So can you help the audience understand how to navigate the landscape of these ABM vendors and how in these scenarios CMOs may want to consider approaching operationalizing ABM advertising?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that question, Rahul. In fact, we know that there's a lot of choices, options available to customers, and it can get quite confusing, right? So what we've sketched out here is a very simple way to think about the key constituencies and parties involved. So you've got, of course, the customer. Now, the customer, many of our customers actually have direct relationships with what are called third-party data providers that provide the targeting data for running these ABM advertising programs. So you have customers have that direct relationship and ownership of a bunch of that data. And then customers are looking to establish a relationship or a partnership with a provider of an enterprise ABM technology platform. So that's why you see a direct line there. That is quite different, as you know, Rahul, from the more traditional model where you've had media agencies, marketing agencies have all the technology relationships. Certainly, as it gets into this hybrid MarTech, ad tech kind of, zone. So now what is interesting here, and we see as an evolution in the last, year plus, is the fact that, mid to large B2B companies are now able to establish that direct partnership, direct relationship with an ABM advertising platform provider. The platform provider then either has third-party data that they can bring to the customer themselves, and then you have some providers that are also able to work hand in hand as a partner with media agencies, and some don't, right? And then you have some providers that are able to work with the customer's in-house third-party data and some don't. So those are important considerations for CMOs because they really should be thinking about an ABM ad platform, enterprise ABM platform that can provide these capabilities, that is much more flexible, much more open, is able to not kind of, I call it double dip or cause it, doubling of costs, in that whatever assets the customer has in terms of technology in-house, data assets in-house, resources and staffing in-house, you will want to find an ABM platform partner that is able to work with what you have, right? And we call that adaptive, which is really be flexible in the business arrangements and the operational arrangements that you can put in place. And if you look at the bottom right, we were just trying to call out, some of the key considerations. You'll see variances as a CMO in the account reach that different platforms are able to provide. Some are North America only, some can go global. You will see differences in the targeting capabilities. Some can really target down to the buyer persona level, and some are not as strong in that area. Third is really reporting. How deep can they deliver reports and reporting? So I hope I kind of painted that picture, Rahul, around these are some of the dimensions in which CMOs will want to evaluate potential partners in this area.
Yeah, it's really helpful. So netted out, what you're saying is Quanzu can really work with a variety of marketing applications. The other thing I'm hearing you say is if the customer has their own third-party data sources, Quanzu can leverage them. If not, Quanzu can help provide them.
Yes.
And lastly, if you're working with an agency, then certainly Quanzu can help augment that. If not, you can also bring to bear your own resources to make sure that the paid ABM advertising implementation is successful. So that's sounds like you can have your cake and eat it. That's great. That's fantastic. So now let's go back to our example, right? Which is I'm this fictitious company that wants to generate $500 million in new pipeline from this new product. So where do I begin?
Awesome. Let's go there. So I think this is where we really recommend that you want to focus on the data that you have. You meaning the CMO at our company should be thinking about the data and starting to map out several things. One is, of course, the ideal customer profile, which they will be able to get a lot of insight around. They may already have the insight, or they can refine it over time. In our example, we certainly were saying that this is existing customer base and you're trying to upsell. So start with your CRM system. Look at your recent history of closed won and closed lost deals, and kind of refine your account profile of the kinds of accounts you should be going after, kind of firmographic data that you see there. But the nice thing here is now there's a range of what are called in-market intent providers. These are providers that can give some further insight to the CMO and their demand gen teams as to which of their large list of accounts, could be several hundred to a few thousand accounts, should be prioritized, meaning they are potentially in market. There's active buyer behavior of the buyers from those companies being active on third-party media properties. Buyers have actually given shared some information in certain public sources, public forums. So take that into consideration for sure. And then last but not least is really installed technologies. Certain accounts might be more amenable to doing business with your company, meaning they're completely greenfield. They don't have any of your competitor solutions. They don't have they certainly have all the right complementary solutions to make your product fit in easily into that. So Rahul, really account selection and the right account selection is super critical from our perspective for ABM advertising. Is where we would start as account selection.
Yeah, I love that. I think what you're doing is you're saying it's great to begin with a revenue segment, for example, strategic accounts or healthcare industry or Asia Pacific region. And what you're doing is you can help kind of take that further and really identify accounts that are going to deliver revenue, right?
Yeah.
That's fantastic. But the other aspect of ABM that really resonates with me is the notion of buyer personas. So can you speak to a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely, Rahul. And so because, it's not just the accounts, it is really truly deeply understanding your buyer personas, which, as you know, change based on the specific product or solution your company may be selling into the same account. So we really recommend mapping out your buyer personas at some detail. So understand the seniority levels, understand the functions, also understand, and by the way, this is not all on the CMO, of course, right? It's at the team level. As a CMO, you want to make sure your team understands the capabilities of all the third-party audience and data partners that may be put to use by your ABM advertising provider, vendor, partner, and knowing, to what degree or what depth of targeting you can go, right, around each of your buying groups and buyer personas. So that is the other key dimension, Rahul, to making these kind of programs really work, is not just account but the buyer personas.
Yeah, this is great. And what this reminds me of is sort of, it encourages marketing teams to think like salespeople do. So salespeople, when they think about accounts, they ask questions like, well, do I have the decision maker? Who's going to be the one that might be blocking the deal, the gatekeeper? Who's going to be the users? Who holds the purse string? So I think what this does is, this notion, ABM notion of buying group, really binds all of that together. I'd also augment, say on top of that, look, the customers we deal with, data is a messy world, right? And a lot of the times you have to kind of clean the data, titles are missing, to enable this, and I know Fortella can help with that. But the other part of it is that we see this is a tough problem, because there's a lot of variance in titles that you see in customers. The stat that we see across our customers is something like 1 to 3 ratio of unique titles in a large database. So for every 3 records that you have, only maps to 1 unique title. So I think unless there's a technology available that can parse that and connect it to what sales is really doing, it's going to be hard to deliver that. And Fortella can help, but that's a conversation for another day. But I like this overall idea of saying, okay, what are the segments I'm targeting? Who are the accounts that are most interested? And within it, who are the people, who are the personas that I should most care about? So that makes sense. Sounds very expensive, right? So how expensive is ABM advertising? And can you help CMOs rationalize the business case for ABM advertising versus lots of other things that they have to do today? And why should this be one of their top priorities for 2020?
Yeah, thank you, Rahul, for that, because you're absolutely correct. I haven't, I would love to see more across the industry in terms of kind of, more information, analysis, research done around, as relative cost of engaging what I call, relevant buyers at target accounts. Given ABM, as you know, is relatively new in the past 2-3 years, where marketing has started thinking from ABM mindset. This visual is really trying to explain to our CMOs that programmatic ABM is not as expensive as they might have thought. I mean, in fact, as you can see here, it really is the second lowest cost option as a way to reach and engage buyers at target accounts. I mean, we've done some of this analysis, and what we found, Rahul, is, of course, marketing emails, using your marketing automation platforms and tools. Certainly, when you have in-house first-party data, it's certainly, the lowest cost way to reach and engage someone. And then you still have, site retargeting, which is people visiting your website, and then you can, go after them and try to convert them into forms and so forth. You've got content syndication leads. You've got pay-per-click SEM. On to LinkedIn. LinkedIn ABM, as you know, LinkedIn has certainly high-quality data, so you are able to reach and engage buyers. But it tends to get quite a bit more expensive. And live events, of course, are high quality and high value. No question about that. But if you literally are trying to build a lot of pipeline, reach and engage, hundreds of accounts to a few thousand accounts, and when you have fairly complex buying groups, programmatic ABM is really one of the, as you can see, one of the lowest cost ways to reach and engage those buyers, especially those hard to reach executive buyers who are not going to, click on your emails or pick up the phone when your SDR, calls on them. Rahul?
Yeah, this is these statistics are quite staggering. So what I'm saying is that the cost of programmatic ABM is something like a tenth or 10% of doing live conferences or events, and a third of content syndication. That's quite compelling, and of course it's much more targeted, which I love. So okay, you've convinced me that ABM advertising should be a core part of my 2020 strategy and help me rationalize a business case for that. So let's move forward and say, okay, back to our example. I'm trying to now generate the pipeline, and I put the ABM advertising program in place. How do I know that it's working, right? How do I review its progress as part of my overall mix? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I think there are probably two things to talk about here, Rahul. First is let's talk a little bit about budgeting, and then we certainly get to the return on that budget and spend, right? So on the budgeting side, what we see customers do is really map out all the accounts that sales is going after. So you'll have you'll have a plan for that 500 million pipeline, a set of overall number of accounts you want to get to. Now you may not have budget as a CMO, right, to have ABM advertising air cover, so to speak, for your salespeople for all those accounts. So assuming we've done the exercise we talked about earlier, and you've picked your so-called best fit accounts and next best fit accounts by quarter. So that's when we see, a subset of those total number of accounts that are then provided, or the CMO set those up, for air cover using ABM advertising. So then you need to have a quarterly ABM program budget set aside for these ABM advertising programs. And here's certainly a cost model that we offer at Quanzu. It's a cost per account per quarter model, which is fully loaded. That's certainly how we recommend CMOs think about it. And I know for CMOs it gets pretty confusing. They have different vendors, different providers. Some will come in and pitch them on, hey, 70,000 to 100,000 of platform fees. They may not necessarily know up front, how many ads are going to be served, what's the media budget, what's the data budget, and we think it gets pretty darn confusing, right, for CMOs and even demand gen directors and heads of marketing. So we've tried to help, we're trying to, in a sense, innovate even in this area by defining a simple cost per account per quarter as a model, right? And then we are recommending that CMOs and their teams focus on the key outcomes. And the outcomes are all around tracking these, what I call later stage metrics. And Rahul, to your earlier point, forget about clicks and impressions, who cares, right? It's really sales demos, opportunity pipeline, new opportunity pipeline created at these set of accounts that are being provided this ABM air cover, days to close, how fast are we closing, and days to change of opportunity status. Are the deals moving in the pipeline? So those are the key metrics. And I know you also asked me, okay, can you go further? What else do you do with in terms of ongoing operational? So this is, I'm not suggesting CMOs need to, dig into this other than perhaps monitoring, right, what's happening, and then roll it up to, as I said, the key metrics around opportunity value. But certainly the team needs to be looking at some of the lower level metrics, right? Email engagement even, is that trending up? Is that going up at the accounts that are receiving these ABM advertising air cover? And then, of course, we already talked about some of the later stage stuff. Rahul?
Yeah, I love this. So, in this fictitious company that we just talked about, if you have a average contract value of, say, 50,000.
Yeah.
What you're saying is a company, can get ABM advertising to work for that for less than 1% of that ACV, right? For $100 maximum $100 a quarter, $400 a year. That's pretty compelling. I think the other thing that was found interesting was that your point about sort of continuing to review and adjust your strategy. And I'm a big proponent of that, having that agility, because the reality is that, in any revenue life cycle, if you consider count for things like seasonality, there's a lot of variables here. The opportunity sizes fluctuate, the conversion rates fluctuate, the time to conversion fluctuates. And what this gives the CMO is the ability to adjust their strategy on a regular cadence to make sure that they really stay focused on their pipeline goals and can achieve those. So that's fantastic.
Yeah.
So I'd love for you to summarize. Go ahead.
No, right. I know that we need to summarize, but before we do, I thought I should just mention a couple of quick things, Rahul, if you don't mind, on really adjusting the strategies. I know you asked about that too. So I wanted to mention that the cost of ABM advertising, since we talked about it earlier, something CMOs should keep in mind is programmatic ABM is a great complement to another area that we know many companies are investing, which is LinkedIn, right, for ABM, ABM advertising. So programmatic ABM works hand in hand, but having said that, it ends up being a third of the cost of LinkedIn ABM, while delivering significantly more reach. That's certainly one thing we've seen when companies run these two programs side by side. And programmatic ABM also complements retargeting programs. When you need to, once you bring an audience in, you want to, again, retarget them with more ads, and then you want to track analytics across all of that. So I know we covered a lot of ground here, Rahul, and it'd be great if you sum it up for the audience.
Great, I will do. Yeah, so I think what we heard, moving to the next slide, is that we both believe that marketing KPIs should really be aligned with a company's revenue goals and revenue outcomes as it relates to their growth strategy. It's really important to plan and execute marketing tactics around your company's revenue plan and speak the language of your CEOs, your CROs, your CFO, and the board. And I think you did a great job of sort of articulating why, as part of your marketing mix, as you're thinking about a variety of levers to pull, why ABM advertising should really be top of mind and core part of a CMO's 2020 plan. And you provided ample evidence of how ABM advertising can deliver ROI, but it's also timely given all the changes that are going on in the landscape around CCPA, the privacy, and most importantly, it's a great way to get a revenue uplift over some of the other conventional marketing tactics. So anything I missed, Mani?
No, I think you summed it up pretty well, Rahul. So with that, let me put up our next slide as we wrap up here. This is certainly a way for folks listening to get in touch with us at Quanzu. We have some contact information, and also we have information on Fortella. And Rahul, it's been a real pleasure doing this webinar with you as we wrap up.
Thank you, Mani. And if anybody has any needs around helping make sure they can make that pipeline number for 2020, you know where to come to.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you, Rahul. Talk soon. Bye-bye.